Imagine a crisp autumn morning in early October 1982. Across the quiet, unsuspecting suburbs of Chicago, a silent predator was already at work, lurking not in shadows, but in the most innocent of places, inside America's medicine cabinets. This enemy wasn't a masked killer wielding a weapon, or a shadowy figure striking in the dead of night. No, this foe was far more insidious, far more terrifying. It was a familiar, trusted household name transformed into an instrument of swift, agonizing death. One by one, seemingly healthy individuals began to collapse without warning. A bright-eyed child, a bustling young mother, a diligent husband, ordinary Americans simply reaching for an ordinary pill to quell an ordinary headache. And then, nothing. Just sudden, inexplicable death. The horror rippled outward from suburban homes, erupting into a nationwide frenzy. Panic exploded like wildfire. What was happening? Who or what was behind this unspeakable act of terror? Authorities were baffled, overwhelmed, scrambling desperately to understand how a commonplace, over-the-counter medicine, Johnson & Johnson's Tylenol, had become a vehicle for cyanide poisoning. This wasn't merely a series of tragic, isolated deaths. It was an unprecedented national crisis, a direct, brutal assault on the very fabric of public trust and safety. The chilling idea that something meant to heal could instead lethally betray you shattered a foundational sense of security. America watched in collective horror as families grieved and investigators chased phantoms. The infamous Tylenol murders didn't just spawn a perplexing, enduring cold case. They fundamentally reshaped our relationship with consumer products, igniting a deep-seated fear that, to this very day, whispers from beneath the surface of every tamper-evident seal. Join us as we delve into this profound, still unsolved mystery, a harrowing story of terror, trust betrayed, and a chilling legacy that forever changed the way America lives. Imagine a Tuesday morning, ordinary in every conceivable way. The sun rises over Chicago, painting the sky with the promise of a typical September day in 1982. Across the sprawling metropolitan area, millions are stirring, sipping coffee, preparing for work or school. They feel safe, cocooned in the comforting predictability of their daily routines. They believe in the remedies lying in their medicine cabinets, especially the trusted ones. But on this particular Tuesday, an invisible menace, colder than any autumn chill, was already moving amongst them, poised to shatter that illusion of safety forever. It was a predator without a face, without a sound, striking with horrifying stealth. And its first victim was a young girl named Mary Kellerman. Mary, just 12 years old, was a bright, energetic sixth grader. On September 29th, she woke up feeling under the weather, a common cold or flu perhaps. Her parents, like countless others, reached for what they considered a benign, effective solution: Tylenol extra-strength capsules. They gave her one. Within hours, Mary collapsed. Her parents, terrified, rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. Mary Kellerman was pronounced dead. The cause a bewildering mystery to the attending physicians. They suspected a stroke, perhaps a freak aneurysm, but nothing definitive. Hours later, just a few miles away in Arlington Heights, the Yanis family was reeling from their own sudden tragedy. Adam Yanis, a postal worker, healthy and vibrant at 27, had also complained of chest pain and collapsed that same morning. His family, in shock, gathered to mourn him. At his home, during their grief-stricken vigil, Adam's brother, Stanley, 25, and his wife, Teresa, 20, both began to feel unwell. They took Tylenol capsules from the very same bottle Adam had used. Within minutes, they too collapsed, seizing violently. By the end of the day, Stanley and Teresa Yanis were also dead. 3 healthy adults, all gone, within hours of each other, from seemingly inexplicable causes. The pattern was invisible, the connection unthinkable. Then came the horrifying realization. Just over the next 2 days, the nightmare continued its relentless spread. In Lombard, Mary McFarland, a 31-year-old flight attendant, collapsed and died after taking Tylenol for a headache. In Winfield, Paula Prince, a 35-year-old mother of 2, was found dead in her apartment, a bottle of Tylenol by her side. And in Elk Grove Village, 2 more victims, 35-year-old Deborah Ashley and 27-year-old Elizabeth Franks, both perished after ingesting the same popular pain reliever. 7 lives extinguished in a terrifyingly short span across a wide swath of the Chicago metropolitan area. The medical community was baffled, then frantic. What was happening? Was it a bizarre flu strain, a sudden aggressive illness? Then, a crucial detail emerged. Every single victim had recently taken extra-strength Tylenol capsules. This was no coincidence. Investigators working with forensic toxicologists began to test the pills. What they found sent a shockwave of terror across the nation. Each capsule was laced with a lethal dose of cyanide, a poison so potent it could kill within minutes. The comforting blue and white capsules, once a symbol of relief, had become instruments of death. The realization that an everyday household item could be transformed into a weapon struck at the very core of public trust. An invisible killer had not just struck, it had invaded the sanctuary of millions of homes, transforming medicine cabinets into potential death traps. The frantic, unprecedented recall of Tylenol began, millions of bottles pulled from shelves, but the damage was done. The Chicago Tylenol Murders had begun, unleashing a panic that would forever change how America thought about its over-the-counter medications. And the perpetrator, the mastermind behind this insidious attack, remained elusive, a ghost in the shadows, leaving behind a trail of terror and an enduring, chilling mystery. Imagine, if you will, a time not so long ago when the simple act of reaching for an over-the-counter pain reliever could plunge an entire nation into a chilling abyss of terror. Picture a seemingly ordinary autumn day in 1982, when a silent, invisible assailant began to stalk the aisles of America's pharmacies and grocery stores, turning trusted remedies into instruments of death. This wasn't a bomb threat, nor a contagious disease spreading through the air. This was far more insidious, far more personal. This was poison, lurking in the very capsules millions relied upon for comfort and relief. The headlines screamed, but even they couldn't fully capture the visceral panic that erupted. News anchors, usually calm and composed, delivered urgent warnings with visible apprehension, their voices edged with a gravitas reserved for national emergencies. "Do not take Tylenol," they cautioned, their words echoing in living rooms across the country, transforming a household staple into a symbol of lethal uncertainty. It was a decree that sliced through the ordinary hum of daily life, forcing an immediate, terrifying confrontation with vulnerability. Suddenly, that familiar red and white box wasn't just medicine, it was a potential death sentence. And the fear was palpable, radiating from every television screen, every radio broadcast, every hushed conversation on the street corner.
Then came the unprecedented, sweeping response. Johnson & Johnson, the behemoth behind Tylenol, faced a crisis unlike any before. They initiated the largest product recall in American history at that time, a staggering 31 million bottles pulled from shelves in a desperate, frantic effort to contain the poison's reach. Imagine the logistical nightmare, the sheer scale of such an operation, all against the backdrop of mounting fatalities and escalating public hysteria. But even as warehouses scrambled and trucks rolled, the damage was already done to the psyche of a trusting nation. Walk into any grocery store or pharmacy in those bewildering weeks, and the atmosphere was thick with an eerie silence, a stark contrast to the usual bustle. The shelves where Tylenol once sat, a testament to its ubiquity, were starkly, chillingly empty. Shoppers, usually navigating aisles with nonchalance, now moved with a new, guarded caution. They scrutinized packaging, eyed generic brands with suspicion, and engaged in hushed conversations about the latest victim, their faces etched with a profound unease. Every pill bottle, every sealed package seemed to harbor a silent question. Is this safe? Can I trust this? The very act of purchasing medication, once a routine errand, became fraught with existential dread.
This wasn't merely a local crime story confined to the Chicago area. It exploded into a full-blown national crisis of trust and safety. It pierced the illusion of American invulnerability, exposing a chilling vulnerability in the everyday products we consume without a second thought. The Tylenol murders revealed that even the most reputable corporations and the products they sold could be hijacked by malevolent forces. It shattered an unspoken contract between consumer and manufacturer, one built on the bedrock of blind faith. People no longer felt safe, not in their homes, not in their pharmacies, not with the most basic remedies. The incident didn't just claim lives, it stole a piece of America's innocence, leaving behind a profound legacy of suspicion and forever altering how products are packaged, how safety is regulated, and how a nation would forever view the simple act of taking a pill. The echoes of that tainted trust still resonate today, a chilling reminder of a fear that once gripped a nation. The year was 1982. The American dream, for many, was still within reach, painted in hues of suburban comfort and consumer trust. But then, a shadow fell. Not a shadow of war or economic collapse, but something far more insidious, born of a malevolent mind and a commonplace item, a Tylenol capsule. When 7 innocent lives in the Chicago metropolitan area were extinguished, not by bullet or blade, but by cyanide cunningly placed inside over-the-counter medicine, America gasped. This wasn't just a crime, it was an act of terror, an invisible enemy striking from within the very fabric of daily life. The scale of the horror was immediate, the panic palpable. How do you hunt a phantom killer when their weapon is a pill bottle and their motive a void? This was the question that launched an investigation unlike any the world had ever seen. The response was immediate and overwhelming. In the labyrinthine streets of Chicago and its quiet suburbs, local police departments were quickly swamped. This wasn't a domestic dispute, a street robbery, or a singular homicide. This was an unprecedented attack on public safety. Realizing the colossal nature of the threat, the Illinois State Police swiftly joined the fray, their resources and expertise proving vital. But even their combined might wasn't enough. The poison had traversed county lines, potentially state borders, and certainly the psychological boundaries of a nation. It demanded a federal response. That's when the FBI, accustomed to organized crime and counterterrorism, stepped into a domestic crisis of unfathomable proportions. This tripartite alliance, local precinct detectives, state investigators, and federal agents, was a monumental undertaking, fraught with challenges. Communication lines stretched taut.
Jurisdictional boundaries blurred. Each agency, with its own protocols and priorities, had to learn to dance a complex tango, often in the blinding spotlight of national media. They set up command centers, overflowing with maps, phone lines, and whiteboards scrawled with names of victims, theories, and dead ends. The sheer volume of incoming calls, tips, both genuine and deranged, threatened to paralyze their efforts.
There was no forced entry, no struggle, no bloody fingerprint. The crime scene was every medicine cabinet, every pharmacy shelf across the country. The challenges were staggering. First, the motive was a void. Unlike most murders, there was no personal vendetta, no robbery gone wrong, no passion play. This was seemingly random, yet horrifyingly precise. Second, the mechanism of delivery was insidious. How was the cyanide introduced into the capsules? Was it done at the manufacturing plant, during distribution, or by a lone wolf tampering with bottles on store shelves? Disentangling this became a Herculean task. Thousands of Tylenol bottles were pulled from shelves, each one a potential death trap, creating a logistical nightmare that mirrored the investigative one. Every flicker of a lead was chased with relentless urgency. One early theory focused on a disgruntled employee, a common thread in many corporate sabotage cases. Detectives meticulously interviewed thousands of current and former Johnson & Johnson employees, delving into their backgrounds, grievances, and personal lives. Every dismissed worker, every internal dispute was scrutinized, but nothing solid materialized. The leads fizzled into frustration. Then there was the chilling possibility of a copycat. The sheer publicity surrounding the initial deaths triggered a wave of copycat incidents, not just with Tylenol, but with other over-the-counter drugs and even food products. This further muddied the waters, forcing investigators to discern genuine threats from malicious hoaxes, draining precious resources and sowing even greater public fear. Another significant lead centered on James Lewis, a man who, shortly after the poisonings, sent an extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killings. He claimed responsibility, stating he knew how the poisonings occurred. For a time, Lewis became the prime suspect. His bizarre correspondence and apparent knowledge made him seem like the missing piece. Detectives pored over his history, his psychological profile, his movements. He was eventually convicted of extortion, but the crucial link to the actual poisonings, the irrefutable evidence that he was the killer, never materialized. He maintained his innocence regarding the murders, and despite intense scrutiny, investigators could never definitively place him with the poisoned Tylenol. He was a red herring, a distraction, albeit a highly compelling one. The hunt stretched on, a relentless, frustrating odyssey. Investigators followed hundreds of tips, interviewed thousands of people, collected mountains of evidence, empty bottles, medical records, store receipts, psychological profiles. Each piece of the puzzle, painstakingly examined, seemed to lead nowhere concrete. The shadowy figure behind the cyanide-laced capsules remained just that, a shadow. The killer's silence was deafening, the lack of a clear motive maddening.
The terror, once unleashed, left a trail of questions as wide as the nation itself. Who was truly responsible for the Tylenol murders? The relentless, agonizing pursuit of answers began immediately, focusing on a shadowy figure who quickly emerged as the prime suspect, James William Lewis. But the path to justice, much like the poisoned capsules themselves, was fraught with unseen dangers and infuriating dead ends. Lewis wasn't a stranger to the McNeil Consumer Products Company, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, the parent company of Tylenol. He was an accountant who had previously worked for a tax firm that consulted for the company. This seemingly mundane connection would soon turn sinister. On October 6, 1982, as the nation reeled, the FBI received a chilling letter, postmarked from New York. Addressed to Johnson & Johnson, it was a demand for $1 million payable to a numbered bank account. The author claimed responsibility for the deaths, threatening to continue poisoning Tylenol if his demands weren't met. He signed it, chillingly, "The Tylenol Killer." The investigators quickly linked the extortion attempt to James William Lewis. His estranged wife, who worked at a New York bank where the account was opened, provided crucial information. Lewis had a history of white-collar crime, including mail fraud and tax evasion. He was a man with a demonstrable motive for revenge against Johnson & Johnson, having previously attempted to extort another of their subsidiaries, McNeil Consumer Products, earlier that same year over an unrelated billing dispute. His modus operandi for the Tylenol extortion was eerily similar, demanding money via letter, using coded language, and demonstrating a knowledge of the company's internal workings. The FBI's case against Lewis was robust, built on a foundation of circumstantial evidence. They found his fingerprints on documents related to the bank account and the extortion attempt. His handwriting matched that of the ransom letter. Furthermore, Lewis and his wife had been staying at a hotel near the bank where the account was established, and their movements aligned with the timing of the letter's mailing. He also made strange, evasive statements to investigators, offering bizarre, shifting narratives about his whereabouts and activities. Eventually, Lewis was arrested and convicted, not for murder, but for extortion related to the Tylenol deaths, serving over 12 years in prison. But here lies the agonizing twist, the elusive nature of justice that continues to haunt this case. Despite the overwhelming suspicion and the extortion conviction, James William Lewis was never formally charged with the Tylenol murders themselves. Why? Because the crucial, irrefutable physical evidence placing him at the scene of the capsule tampering or linking him directly to the cyanide used was never found. There was no eyewitness placing him in the stores where the poison bottles were bought and returned. No clear fingerprint on a contaminated bottle. No solid proof that he acquired or administered the cyanide. The prosecution simply could not connect him, beyond a reasonable doubt, to the act of murder itself. This evidentiary gap allowed other theories, however fleeting, to persist. Was it a lone wolf, unconnected to Lewis, who acted independently and then inspired Lewis's opportunistic extortion? Or a disgruntled employee with a deep-seated grievance against Johnson & Johnson, acting out a terrifying vendetta? Some even suggested the possibility of a random deranged individual, or even a twisted copycat who struck after the initial reports, though the latter seemed less likely for the foundational acts. Yet despite intense scrutiny and decades of investigation into these avenues, none ever yielded a concrete alternative suspect with the same compelling circumstantial evidence as James William Lewis. Ultimately, the shadow of James William Lewis looms largest over the Tylenol murders, but without that critical piece of direct evidence, the case remains officially unsolved. It's a chilling reminder that suspicion, however strong, does not equate to proof beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. The families of the victims are left with an enduring, agonizing void, a cold case that echoes the frightening vulnerability of everyday life in 1982. The unanswered questions persist, a testament to the elusive nature of true justice when the evidence, no matter how desperately sought, simply isn't there.
Imagine for a moment a world where the very act of reaching for a common medicine, a trusted relief for a headache or a child's fever, became an act of terrifying roulette. In the autumn of 1982, that nightmarish reality descended upon America, born from a handful of poisoned Tylenol capsules in the Chicago metropolitan area. The nation watched, horrified, as 7 innocent lives were extinguished, not by a conventional killer, but by a phantom assailant whose weapon was the very trust we placed in products on our shelves. The immediate impact was a nationwide panic. Pharmacies pulled bottles, People dumped their medicine cabinets. But the long-term ripple effect? It was a seismic shift, one that fundamentally reshaped how every single item we consume is brought to market. Before October 1982, tamper-evident seals were virtually non-existent. Think about that. You could open a bottle of medication, take what you wanted, perhaps add something else, and reseal it without a trace. It was an unthinkable vulnerability, a gaping maw in consumer safety. Within months, the landscape changed forever. Johnson & Johnson, a company whose very name had been synonymous with trust, faced an existential crisis. Their response, a total recall of 31 million bottles and the pioneering introduction of triple-sealed packaging, glued boxes, foil seals, and heat-shrunk plastic bands, wasn't just a corporate decision. It was a desperate, unprecedented act of public trust restoration. This wasn't just a Band-Aid solution, it was a revolution. Competitors quickly followed suit. Suddenly, every over-the-counter drug, every food item, every liquid in a bottle began to appear with telltale signs of security. Shrink wrap, inner seals, breakaway caps. That satisfying pop or crackle you hear when opening a new product today, that's the direct, tangible legacy of those 7 tragic deaths. But the transformation went beyond corporate policy. The Tylenol murders thrust consumer safety onto the national legislative agenda with an urgency never before seen. In 1983, Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, making it a federal crime to tamper with consumer products. Penalties included substantial fines and lengthy prison sentences, sending an unequivocal message that such attacks on public health would be met with the full force of the law. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about prevention. It provided a legal framework, a protective shield designed to deter future acts of product terrorism and hold accountable those who dared to breach the public's faith. The ripple effect extended into the very DNA of corporate responsibility. Before Tylenol, the prevailing mindset for many companies was caveat emptor, buyer beware. After Tylenol, that shifted dramatically. Companies were forced to internalize a new, profound duty to ensure the absolute safety and integrity of their products from manufacture to consumer hands. It wasn't enough to just make a good product. They now had to guarantee its purity, its untouched state. This led to stricter internal quality control, more robust supply chain management, and a new era of transparency with consumers about product safety measures. The very concept of corporate social responsibility gained significant traction, spurred by the stark realization that a single failure in product integrity could devastate a brand, a company, and worst of all, innocent lives. And this transformation wasn't confined to American borders. The Tylenol case became a global case study in crisis management and public health reform. Nations worldwide observed the U.S. response and began to implement similar tamper-evident packaging and anti-tampering laws. From European pharmacies to Asian supermarkets, the subtle, often unnoticed layers of security on your purchases are a testament to the lessons learned from Chicago's tragedy. The Tylenol murders remain a cold case, a chilling enigma that has baffled investigators for decades. The perpetrator or perpetrators have never been brought to justice. That enduring mystery, however, does not diminish the profound, lasting legacy of those 7 lives lost. They changed everything. They forged a new covenant between corporations and consumers built on layers of plastic, foil, and federal law. So the next time you unseal a package, hear that satisfying tear or pop, remember the ghost of a cold case that through unimaginable tragedy gave us a new standard of safety, forever transforming the world of consumer products and, by extension, our daily lives.
4 decades have etched themselves into the annals of history since those fateful days in 1982. Yet the chilling shadow of the Chicago Tylenol murders, a crime that terrorized the nation and forever changed how we consume medicine, persists. How could a killer or killers vanish so completely after unleashing such widespread panic? This is the question that haunts us still. The answer, tragically, lies in a perfect storm of factors. This was a crime almost impossible to solve by conventional means. There were no eyewitnesses, no forced entry, no struggle. The poison was delivered covertly, silently, into homes across the Chicago metropolitan area. Law enforcement, accustomed to tracing direct connections, found themselves chasing ghosts. Forensics, in the early 80s, simply wasn't equipped for such a novel, insidious form of domestic terror. The sheer scale of the tampering and the randomness of its victims created a labyrinth with no clear entrance or exit. For years, the spotlight has primarily fallen on one individual, James Lewis, a man with a chillingly prescient letter demanding $1 million to stop the killings, a man who evaded capture for years, and a man whose wife worked at a drug manufacturing plant. His strange and disturbing connections to the case are undeniable, yet despite decades of scrutiny, countless hours of investigation, and even his eventual death, Lewis was never formally charged with the murders. The evidence, though compelling to many, was never strong enough to secure a conviction. Other theories have floated, copycat attempts, disgruntled employees, but none have ever solidified into a definitive answer. The phantom killer remains just that, a phantom. But make no mistake, the case is far from closed. Periodically, investigators revisit it with renewed vigor, driven by new technologies and an unwavering commitment to justice. DNA analysis, advanced fingerprinting techniques, and digital forensics, tools unimaginable in 1982, have all been brought to bear on the cold case files. The FBI's vault still holds the tangible remnants of this tragedy, constantly hoping a new lead, a forgotten detail, or a breakthrough in science will finally unmask the culprit. The pursuit of answers for those dedicated law enforcement officers is a marathon, not a sprint. Yet for the families of the 7 innocent victims, Mary Kellerman, Adam and Stanley Janus, Teresa Janus, Mary Rayner, Paula Prince, and Monica Strojek, the passage of time offers little solace. Their lives were irrevocably shattered by an act of senseless malice. Each holiday, each milestone, each quiet moment carries the weight of an unresolved grief, a silent scream for justice that has never been fully answered. Imagine the agonizing uncertainty, the torment of knowing a killer walks free, their identity shrouded in mystery. For them, the Tylenol murders are not a historical footnote, but an open wound that refuses to heal. Beyond the personal tragedies, the Tylenol murders carved an indelible mark on the American psyche. Before 1982, consumer trust was an unspoken given. You bought a product, you expected it to be safe. That naive innocence vanished with those 7 lives. It forced an entire industry to reevaluate its practices, leading directly to the tamper-evident packaging we now take for granted on everything from pain relievers to food products. This wasn't just a crime, it was a watershed moment, a stark, terrifying lesson in vulnerability that changed how America interacted with its everyday goods. It birthed an era of heightened awareness, of protective seals and safety instructions born from fear. So the enduring shadow persists, a crime that redefined public safety, spurred unprecedented changes in industry, and yet remains unsolved. The phantom killer of the Chicago Tylenol murders continues to evade justice, a chilling reminder that some mysteries refuse to yield their secrets. But even in its unresolved state, this case continues to serve as a powerful testament to the enduring quest for truth, the resilience of victims' families, and the profound, transformative impact a single horrifying act can have on the fabric of a nation. It is a story not just of murder, but of a society forever changed, forever haunted by the question, who did this, and why were they never caught? The silence offers no comfort, only the echoing whisper of an unfulfilled justice.